The topic for today that we are going to talk about is a very, in term, in layman terms, is a very simple analogy where people just speak about love and trust. Okay. And these are two words that you might often be every day talking about. But today we're going to talk about how did we, when given a problem, used our knowledge and analytics, right? Market research, and most prominently, Bayesian optimization, Bayesian, to determine relationships which drive a service and the trust, which is very important for today's world because now the consumerism is very vast. If consumers don't trust the business, they would not be loyal. And loyalty is a big question mark today, right? Not just in marketing sciences, but now it has become a behavioral problem for the global fraternity, right? So not only does the B2B or the business to business model, but the business to consumer model is all dependent upon, do I trust you? Should I trust you? Does the consumer trust me? Let's go forward and hear it from Anand. And he's going to take us through a journey where we try to understand this in a lot of details. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Dr. Roy, for setting up the context and giving a nice introduction about our topic. Hope you can see my screen as well. Let me go to the presentation mode. Yeah. Before I start, I would like to extend my thanks to Dr. Roy, who motivates and guides me in this field of analytics and the applied intelligence and being a constant mentor and who has really extended his help to bring up this presentation. And I also like to thank the BayesiaLab team and especially Stefan for being available on call for all the support and the thought leadership and the thought lines that Stefan has provided. So thank you, Stefan, for your time and support. So let me start. So the key discussion points for today is variable importance, detailed factor analysis, driver analysis, and we will also talk about the data mart, scorecard ranking, network map. Like stated by Dr. Roy, forming and nurturing long-term relationship with consumers is very crucial these days. Now, this is because of the two major things. One is building a customer relationship extend beyond increased sales and reduced customer attrition. We will have to look beyond these factors because it definitely involves in constructing a solid relationship with the customer, which can give a lot of value to you. And the long-term relationships adds a lot of value to your business as well. Now, the second and the most important factor here is the emergence of real-time data. We have been looking at the market research models and market research data for a quite long time. And even today, a lot of organizations are heavily dependent on the market-based studies to understand the brand perceptions and how their brand is performing in the market. Now, the emergence of real-time data, or rather, I would say that the adoption to real-time data has been increasing, and it is tremendously increasing over the past few years, especially considering the pandemic situation. So, like I said, just wanted to emphasize on two of the major points here. One is the importance of building the customer relationship and maintaining it from a very long-term perspective. Second is the emergence of the real-time data, which is really influencing the critical business processes and the innovation and business strategy. So that's the motivation and initiative behind going and constructing an approach like this. Now, we are calling this as a trust model, which is nothing but a market research measurement program. The idea or the objective of this is to enhance trust among customers and partners by better understanding the deeper factors that will drive trust. So, this is a model that incorporates different types of data. Market research measurement is a solution, can be considered like a solution which can better explain the variances in the stated trust scores which is measured by the different studies. And the solution will also help us to identify factors driving trust perceptions using a variety of variables. Now, the key component of the solution or the measurement program is mainly relative importance, direct and indirect effects, network mark, key drivers, and finally a scorecard ranking. The typical data sources which we can consider for this kind of a study is the first, primary, the market research data. Then the internal telemetry data. When I say telemetry data, it is internal usage telemetry data. Then we can also consider socioeconomic or macroeconomic factors along with technology market factors and company profile. Key components of solutions is key drivers of product satisfaction, direct and indirect effect, interrelationship between attributes and what if scenarios. Now, I can go in detail and explain you when I give you a walkthrough of the example of how these components are helping us to get explainable results from the model. Yep. Let me start with the conceptual model. Now, the conceptual model we are constructing here because we do not have a direct approach of going and doing this model. Hence, we are starting with this conceptual approach, which has two components. One is to create a set of hypotheses between different data sources that is available. So in the network that you can see, there are connections with indirect lines and solid lines. So solid lines fairly represents that there is a direct connections between them, and the dotted lines would mean that there's an indirect connection. Now, how internal telemetry and satisfaction is connected? Because both are coming from the organization side, and internal telemetry is a real-time usage data recorded at the organization side. So the customer base would fairly remain same for the survey and the telemetry data. Once we construct the hypothesis based on the relationship assumptions in the conceptual model, and this is also based on all the preliminary studies that we do in this exercise. Once the hypothesis is set, we will also frame an equation for this integrated based on categorizing the data into two major types. One is controllable and non-controllable. When we say controllable, it means the satisfaction and the internal telemetry data. Yes, of course, we cannot call them as completely controllable, but considering the other macroeconomic and socioeconomic variable, this can be controlled to an extent, especially in terms of designing a survey. What responses would you want to prefer in that? From that perspective, we are categorizing it into two major factions. Once we do the conceptual model, our next step is to establish these relationships by validating all the hypotheses that have been constructed and to define possible association between these different data sources. So in this network, we are showing the different interconnections that can happen, and also what data or what factors can be used to establish these interconnections and rather study the associations between these data. Now, conceptual model will also contribute in developing an association theory. So we need a theory here because the direct measurement is not possible. And this can be validated through the multi-stage modeling that we will be doing. So how do we create a hypothesis? We will have our assumptions, and these assumptions are based on the data provided and the business inputs. Now, after this, we will create an individual level hypothesis like H1, H2, H3 between all the data sources. One-to-one hypothesis will be created, and then the hypothesis will be tested, and the output of this exercise will provide the quantification of impact on factors on risk, actionable insights to improve practice. So these are the two major outcomes of this. Now, that's more like an overall process. Now we will get into detail. So we will start step by step, one by one. So the trust factors are first measured by the satisfaction survey. We will do all possible analysis with the survey data and with the available metrics at the respondent level. So all the analysis will be carried out separately for the satisfaction survey, like we do the traditional way. Once we have done that, we will start using the telemetry data. Now, when we use the telemetry data, there are a lot of iterations that we make. I have not explained everything here, but definitely it is considered for the time and the audience as in proportion with what we have in survey. What would be an outcome of this stage where we are calling this as model one? Will be tabular outputs. Now, this tabular outputs will give us a lot of insights based on cross-sectional analysis, right? Based on certain respondent IDs, how the CSAT and trust is varying. Now, how the revenue is coming there, how the penetration is coming, how the resolution is happening. So that there are multiple metrics that you can see from a crosstalk perspective or a tabular perspective. not necessarily going into a model, but this can give you a lot of explainable or actionable insights from combining these two data. Now we will get into the next level once we do the M1, which is model one. So the M1 results, after that we do, this is the possibility of analysis. Like we have already derived the brand value, preference, and satisfaction metrics. Now, this is a time dependent model. As what happens here is a continuous evaluation of your model, wave to wave comparison of how the metrics are performing, how things are changing, because market research data, which is coming from survey, could be changing based on the respondent level, could be changed. So it is slightly difficult to compare it just from market research perspective, because perception to perception in wave to wave is could be slightly changing and the base is also changing. But the telemetry data is constant and it is running across the entire population. So that provides, or that also provides a validation to the survey, to the findings in the survey data. So here we are enhancing all of that using the socioeconomic market factors and company profile. Now, all of this cannot be bought in a single thing. So we are constructing a scorecard kind of a thing where we can separately analyze this, create segment and see that which is the important segments to focus. What is good to have, what is doing good, what needs to be maintained, what needs to be reworked on. So these are some of the insights we will get by constructing a scorecard. Then we will also construct a network based on all the validated hypotheses and see how different factors are coming each other and how it is contributing to the overall trust. Now, all of this is done using a deep market factor analysis, which will tell us the variation in trust for these factors. A final equation of relationship will be constructed post all these stages, and these stages would help us to do this network with the level of confidence and say that this is how the relative importance scores are coming and how they are directly and indirectly connected and influencing the trust variable. So the entire process is a multi-stage problem approach, which provides a detailed understanding on the associations between different data sources and helps in constructing a network map to get an illustrative view like what we have here. Yep. Now, the theory and approach session is done. So far, I was trying to explain it from an approach perspective. What are the different steps, how we could consider it. I have not gone in very detail saying what all analysis will do, but an overall approach perspective, which will help us to think through the various possibilities of combining these two data. Now, this I am also going to show you a machine learning model where we have done a network analysis on a trust on a tech consumer, where we had a survey data which was for experiential attributes on general hardware and software, which had emotional brand perception also. Then we utilized the telemetry and macroeconomic attributes to add value to the model. I may not need to explain a lot here because most of your audience are familiar with this, but let me just quickly go through this. So we established a network to find the causal relationship between product perceptions. Once we understood the product perception, we also tried to weight each attribute on how much product satisfaction is explained using the perception. Then we also created a latent variable computation, variable clustering. This was done in order to find the homogeneous variables. Now, why this is important? Because we have a lot of variables in the perception study, and creating factors would help us to identify the similarly grouped variables and its importance or its effects on the trust or the satisfaction metric here. Now, why that is important, I'll just show you the very next slide. So this network is with the factors that is established. And here, clearly, we can see that there are only four major factors instead of using every variables into this. And we can see that two of the factors are directly connected to product satisfaction, whereas the other two factors are indirectly connected to the satisfaction. We can also see the different indirect connections between these factors. Now, at this stage, what we've tried to do here is we have both the telemetry and the macroeconomic variables here. And this we have done at a factor level. Now, the key takeaway of this exercise is not just to see to which perceptions or to which survey metric the other two studies are getting connected to, but also to see to which factors it is getting connected to. Now, there are two levels of information, right? First, we need to understand how the variables, how the telemetry and macroeconomics is affecting or explaining your satisfaction. But it is also important to understand at which group it is more important, right? So that is the key analysis that we have tried to done here. And we have indicated the different factors based on the factors and the different studies here. Now, the next slide would be helping us to explain a little more in detail, like we did the latent factor identification. So here we can see that for an example, in factor 6, we have average resolution time and performance, system performance coming from the telemetry data. Now that is grouped along with the two perception variables, which is video camera quality meets my needs, and am I proud to be seen with this device. So what we need to understand here is that the resolution time affects the video and camera related factor than the other factors. And if you try to resolve for those particular area, you would have a better satisfaction rate because that is more affected as compared to the other factors. Now, system performance also can be understood in a similar way that for somebody to be proud with their device, it has to do the performance, right? So roughly speaking, what happens here is you are not just trying to understand how your macroeconomic or telemetry is getting connected to your network or how it is connected to your satisfaction, but rather in understanding at a detail or a deep factor level in which group, or to be precise, to which factor it can have more impact, and then have a resolution plan. So now these kinds of insight, what it brings out or how it will help client is to look at things more specific and see if they could improve this and observe this wave over wave. And then see that how much our model is supporting them, how much value it is creating, how much revenue they are able to save. So all of this are the business additions to it. And like I said, this can be learned time over time. And time over time, your model will also become more robust based on the more data that it trains on. And then you can refresh the model on that. Now, this is an overall summary of your model exercise where you can see that there's a rank to all the attributes that's been already provided and the total effects and the direct effects of each perception variables on the survey trust. And you can also see where the telemetry and the macroeconomic factors could also come in place and how much it can influence your satisfaction, right? Now, what we finally do is create a simulator, web simulator, where a client can understand or consumer can understand by weighing each of the perception, how much the satisfaction could vary. Now, the most important thing is survey perceptions are sometimes not completely uncontrollable. So you can only try to improve it from a perception and see how that is improving over a next service cycle or a next week. But since you have the telemetry data here, which will speak of your average resolution time for an issue, or which will speak of your system performance, or which will tell you how much on an average a user is using your system screen time. So these are the variables that you can have a control on. Whereas you can look at and see how, if you reduce the average resolution time, how much of your satisfaction can improve. And for that, you don't have to wait till your next service cycle. You can directly put that variable here and see that how much of attainment you can do. And you can keep your business target and work towards it. Now, another thing is the macroeconomic variables. Now, you know that the inflation is going up and GDP related factors. And if you want to see, there's a projected inflation of this much. And if you want to see how much that may affect your product satisfaction, then you can project that. Now, if you want to take that risk and improve the satisfaction on other factors, keeping this in mind, you can work all of this in a simulator. So that's the idea behind it. And I hope it has given some level of understanding. I'm sorry, I was not very detailed into it, but I hope I was able to walk you through some of the content